Dave Asprey is a four-time New York Times bestselling science author, host of the Webby award-winning podcast The Human Upgrade, and has been featured on The Today Show, CNN, The New York Times, Dr. Oz, and more. Over the last 2 decades, Dave, the father of biohacking, has worked with world-renowned doctors, researchers, scientists, and global mavericks to uncover the latest, most innovative methods, techniques, and products for enhancing mental and physical performance. He's the author of the best-selling book, Fast, This Way, Superhuman, and The Bulletproof Diet, and is the creator of Upgrade Labs and Danger Coffee. It's a pleasure to invite Dave onto the show. Dave, thank you so much for being here. We have been friends for so many years now. It feels like a decade since the first biohacking conference that I went to, and it's been such a pleasure to follow along with your social media and your books. And I would say the last couple of years have been my favorite because your sarcasm has just been taken to the next level. And there's not a post that I don't laugh. So thank you for bringing levity to my life. And
You're welcome.
for being willing to just tell it like it is.
Well, I kind of feel like, you can fight against something and it makes it stronger. But humor is actually what they use to overthrow governments and tyrants the most. When people laugh at you instead of fear you, you know you've lost it. And well, if you do things that are worthy of laughable behavior, there's a certain type of person whose job it is to laugh, and maybe others will join in. So note to people at companies and governments and regulatory bodies, don't do stupid stuff and we won't laugh at you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Truly. Well, for people that don't know you, I would be surprised, but definitely follow Dave Asprey online because you'll have a chuckle. But Dave is the godfather of biohacking. You have been in this for so long now, investing in companies, creating companies. I felt like really on the cutting edge of what's new for longevity and biohacking. And I mean, you might have been the first person I ever heard say intermittent fasting. So there's a lot to unpack on today's podcast episode. But first, I want to know what led you into this health field and got you excited about it.
Well, I'm getting ready to make a move to a second home in Austin, and I was just packing up. And I came across a Polaroid. These were what you used before you had digital cameras. And it was from my first ever photo shoot for a magazine. I was 22 years old. And I weighed 300 pounds in that picture. And the photographer came to my house to take a picture of me wearing an extra, extra large t-shirt that said caffeine, my drug of choice. This was the first product ever sold over the internet before e-commerce had a name. But I saw this picture that I didn't know I had. And I looked at it and I'm like, that is the lowest testosterone guy I've ever seen. Because I'm 300 pounds. I am very, very large. But also, I looked androgynous. And I'm posting that on my Dave, I think it's Dave.Asprey on Instagram. I'm posting that in a little while. But I looked at that, I'm like, oh my God, I look so sick, right? And my skin is unhealthy. I'm so obese. And I care, I'm passionate. I just started this company. I'm putting all of my effort into things and it wasn't working. It got worse from there. By the time I'm in my late 20s, they're like, oh, you've had arthritis and high risk of stroke and heart attack and pre-diabetes and chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia and all these things. Doctors couldn't help. And what got me going on this was, look, if I can hack the internet, which is my job, maybe, just maybe I can hack this. And I just started learning from the anti-aging field, people 3 times my age with twice my energy. I'm like, okay, what are you doing? I'm doing that. And that was the start of biohacking.
Yeah, you were definitely on a mission at that point in time. I mean, I think I remember hearing on other podcasts and just following along, you had tried everything, right? I mean, it wasn't that you were gorging yourself on food or having excessive amounts of calories at this time, or were you?
Oh, everyone knows that fat people are fat because they're lazy, right? I mean,
Oh, it's the most frustrating thing to hear.
well, the problem is when, at least back then, and probably even to a certain extent today, that's what I believed. So I believed that because I was in that kind of shape, that it was just because I wasn't trying hard enough or because I didn't have enough willpower or enough self-control. And that really, like, it hurts your soul at a certain level, because you just feel like you're a failure, and you realize, but I didn't, like, I did everything. I worked out an hour and a half a day, 6 days a week. I went on a low fat, semi-vegetarian diet. And it just didn't work. After 18 months, I could max out all but 2 machines at the gym, and I still had a 46-inch waist. And I just don't want anyone else to go through it. So the whole reason there's 3,000 articles and 1,000 hours of video and, I don't know, 7 or 8 books and 4 New York Times bestsellers is because if someone had just done this for me, it would have cost me, $10,000 to get out of all of the diseases I had that included toxic mold exposure and heavy metals and all that kind of stuff. I could have just fixed it. So if people listen to the show, people read the stuff, they just search and find my content, or those in the movement. It's my job to find it early and curate it, make sure it's real. And now, I mean, how many books about intermittent fasting have you seen? There's a lot. But if you look at the first mainstream diet book that has cyclical ketosis, like clean keto, intermittent fasting, lectins, circadian timing, it's all in there. And I published that book in 2014, and all the info was online in 2011. So it's my job to find it first, test it out, and then share it, and then create a movement. And now there's, a whole anti-kale movement. Like, who's the guy in chapter 1 on the book? Yeah, like here. And I did even have a few kale recipes. I'm like, use it sparingly. It's not very safe. And since that time when kale used to be, you could never say anything bad about it, but I did. Now I'm just straight up like, why would you do that to yourself? But if you want to do it once a week, I don't care. But the people who are really punching themselves in the kidney with kale, someone has to tell them so that they don't end up in the hospital. Because it's not fair. Like, we have to do something. So Kelly, thank you for being there from the early days to help.
Yeah, well, let's unpack a couple of those things. Let's start with kale, and the punch in the kidneys. Can you explain the science behind that?
Uh-huh.
Because you have demonized kale, so we want to we
Well,
want to we want
kale,
to throw
and
something in that.
it turns out raw spinach is even a little worse than kale. But both kale and spinach have high levels of a compound called oxalate, or oxalic acid. And this is something that's also present, though, in almonds in high levels. That almond milk may not be as good for you as you think, but it's not like we can't have any oxalate in our diet. You just don't want very much. Plants use this to stop insects and grazing animals, like humans, if we're going to eat plants. Then they stop us from over consuming them because they cause harm to us. What oxalic acid does is it enters the body, and then it forms crystals, tiny razor sharp crystals with calcium, and they move around in the body. If they get in your joints, you get joint pain, gout. If they get in your kidneys, you get kidney stones. This is the number 2 cause of kidney stones right now, is oxalic acid or oxalate stones, not uric acid, which everyone thinks it is, which it can be. And it also can cause brain fog, cravings. It shreds your gut lining, and it causes a condition called vulvodynia, where those crystals end up in the vulva, and you will find yourself wearing a skirt and no panties because it's too painful. You can't touch it. So why are we doing this as a health food? Because we learned a long time ago that suffering makes us better people. That's why we go to the gym to work out to lose weight, even though that's not how you lose weight. And that's why we think we should eat like sticks and twigs and rocks and all sorts of other things that aren't really food unless you're dying of starvation. So that's the story with kale and spinach, except it gets worse, because kale is the food that more than any other food out there will accumulate a toxic metal called thallium. And thallium was used to poison people. It was called the poisoner's poison back when Russia used that instead of polonium, which is a way more high-tech way to say, hey guys, we killed you with radioactive materials that only we could make, but we didn't do it because you can't prove it. So polonium is not what is in kale, although it wouldn't surprise me. Kale's very sneaky that way. It's thallium. And if you're saying, well, where's thallium in our environment? Why would you care? When we took lead out of our gasoline, lead's a very bad contaminant. Any amount of lead increases cardiovascular disease unless it's paired with something that reduces cardiovascular disease. But thallium, we took lead out, we put thallium in, which is 1,000 times worse than lead. So now if cars drive anywhere near where your precious kale that costs more per calorie than ribeye steak, I don't know why you're doing that. Like you're getting extra toxins in 2 different ways, and you're getting something that tastes bad. And then you get the people, Kale, you say, but I like kale. No, you don't. You like bacon. And you like kale if there's bacon on it, or you like maple syrup, or you like MSG in the guise of nutritional yeast. So bottom line, I am freeing you from eating kale. And if you really want to eat spinach, you shouldn't do that. If you do, cook it, boil it, pour the water off. Don't eat a spinach salad. And then do what your grandmother did. Creamed spinach, where you put cheese or milk into the spinach because the calcium in the milk will stick to the oxalic acid, and at least it'll form crystals on your plate instead of in your blood. So spinach is maybe okay, and kale is maybe okay. Boil, drain, add milk if you're not allergic to milk, which I am. So screw kale, screw spinach. And if you're saying, but Popeye had spinach, what about iron? The iron in spinach is 1.7% absorbable. And that is because, why? Oxalic acid and other compounds in spinach that bind. So yes, the minerals are in there. You just can't get to them because the plant is trying to keep you from eating it. Popeye was not eating cans of spinach. Popeye was injecting testosterone, but they just weren't allowed to say that. Seriously, on the cartoons when Popeye would do this one thing and magically he would grow big muscles, what do you think he was doing? It wasn't spinach. Let me just tell you that.
Oh my goodness, there are so many ways that we can go with this conversation. We can go down the rabbit hole of heavy metals. We can go down the rabbit hole of nutrient density in our ribeye steak and animal proteins. Or we can go down the rabbit hole of why are testosterone levels dropping so dramatically?
I think there's a common element to all of these, and it's minerals, in particular trace minerals. As I'm recording this, I live on a regenerative ag organic farm. We had 3 cows. Now they're in the freezer, so I guess we still have them. At least most of them. I ate some yesterday. We have 25 sheep and 25 pigs and a bunch of chickens. I'm building soil right now. But the soil that I started with, I bought as much as I could from the bottom of a lake on an organic farm that's been working for 100 years. So I have rich, black, amazing soil full of worms. I have minerals in my soil. And people who have a chance to buy some of the meat from the animals or to buy some of the vegetables, they will buy all they can get because they eat them and go, what is in this? I don't even like lamb, but I'm going to buy all of it because all of a sudden they like it. What's going on there is that our soil has been stripped of trace minerals by intensive farming, even your organic soil. Unless there's animals eating grass and pooping back on the soil, you are not going to have minerals in your food. So you tell yourself, well, I saw a table from 1950 that said, this plant had this much mineral. No, it didn't. Only if the soil did. Plants don't have the ability to transmogrify. Oh, look, I'm going to turn carbon into gold. No, we've been trying to do that for a long time. It's called alchemy. Plants don't do that. Neither do humans, sadly. So actually we can turn heavy metals into gold with, I think there's a radioactive process that involves lasers and whatever, but that's a little expensive. So we're going to just set that aside. Humans don't do it in our bodies. So where are the minerals? They're not in your food. And oh, did I just mention oxalic acid is sucking minerals out? That's barely even a thing compared to phytic acid. Humans don't make the enzyme phytase that dissolves turns off phytic acid. Phytic acid will suck calcium and zinc out of your bones. So what we're doing is we're eating these plant-based, nonsense, fake food things, even things like rice cake. All the modern processing of grains leaves this thing intact. Mother Nature, if you have 3 stomachs, you can make this enzyme, but even then they measure how much phytic acid is in food for cows because it makes the cows weak. And then they add an enzyme in to help the cows digest all the grains they're giving to cows, which isn't even a good cow feed. They don't do that for us when we eat the same grains the cows eat and we don't have 3 stomachs. So what's going on here is everyone is mineral depleted. And this is a big part of my next book that comes out. And it's why Danger Coffee has a whole bunch of trace minerals from plants minus the plant toxins added into the coffee. Because they bind toxic metals, they bind other toxins in the gut, and they can enter your cells. So your body now has access to minerals that are missing from your diet and that are being sucked from your body at an unprecedented rate. No biohack works if your cells can't make enzymes because they don't have trace minerals. So I'm going to the very foundation. We all drink coffee every day. Drink Danger Coffee. It's got minerals added back in. And there you go. You feel
Cheers.
better.
Thank you.
Cheers. Dangercoffee.com, if that wasn't a clear enough plug. But
Yeah.
look, I don't have to. I don't have to run any company. I do these things because I can't buy them and because they matter. And this mineral problem is so widespread that bone density is an issue, and testosterone is dropping in part because it takes minerals as cofactors to make a healthy body that can build enough testosterone. But testosterone's down partly because of minerals and partly because of other things. Maybe many people have heard getting enough zinc will raise testosterone. In fact, we might even be getting too much zinc after the last 2 years of that which shall not be mentioned for fear of censorship.
Canceling. Yeah.
So if you take a lot of zinc, it disrupts copper, which you also need to make testosterone. But that's mostly because we've tricked our men into eating garbage and their moms to eat garbage during pregnancy. My very first book was on fertility. What do you eat before and during pregnancy to have healthier kids? Our sex hormones are made out of saturated fat and cholesterol. They are not made out of corn oil, soybean oil, and things like that. So you have these mineral deficient moms and babies and children and young men, and they don't have the substrate for building this because they're eating French fries cooked in canola oil, which causes inflammation. People don't oftentimes recognize where sex hormones are made. Where would you guess they're made, Kelly? Do you know?
I mean, I would assume that they're made in your gonads.
Isn't that such a good word, gonad?
But but I think I'm wrong based on the question.
Some of them are.
Okay.
However, your mitochondria make sex hormones.
Oh, I do know
They
that.
make pregnenolone. They make DHEA, which are the two source hormones for all
Converted.
the other hormones in your body.
Yes.
So when your mitochondria don't work because you ate crappy oils, because someone tried to tell you that eating plants was morally superior to eating animals that are made out of the fats that you're made out of, is it any wonder that your mitochondria that are now dysfunctional, that are making inflammation instead of making sex hormones, is it any wonder that testosterone levels in men, 20-year-old men, are 50% lower than they were a generation before? What that means is that if you're 20 right now and you're a young man, you have the same testosterone level that your grandfather would have had going back 25 years. It's that big of a difference. What this means is that you actually are a soy boy.
Yeah.
And the way you interact with other men, the way you interact with women, the way you interact with your teachers, your employers, your government, all of those are not from a tradition of, well, the way our species has evolved. You are weak. You can do something about that, but you have to be conscious of it. And some of it's hormone disruptors, some of it's glyphosate, actually more than we likely recognize. Some of it's BPA. Others is other types of plasticizers and environmental toxins. But overall, it's fixable. And I put in our Zoom chat a picture of myself when I had less testosterone than my mother at age 22. See, I told you earlier, I'm an early adopter. Mm-hmm. I just did what modern men are doing. I just did it 20 years ago. And I don't want that life for anyone. And you can use that picture if you want when you do the video for this. Because
I'm just gonna share this real quick.
There you go.
There's Dave. You look older there to me than you even look now.
I think I look kind of like, well, very androgynous.
Yeah.
Like,
yes.
Okay. So you wouldn't even think I was the same person between those two pictures, but I was. I can tell you my testosterone levels are around 900 now. I went on testosterone at age 26 when an anti-aging doctor, who was probably already 60 at the time and had been practicing for a long time, was like, oh my God, like your testosterone levels are critically low. In that picture, I was being exposed to environmental estrogens from toxic mold, which has that, we'll say, feminizing effect. And I just had exceptionally low testosterone because when you're obese, your white fat makes estrogen, and your testosterone turns into estrogen more quickly. As I'm here today, okay, I am at 7% body fat, and like my camera's gonna pan up, but like I don't work out very often, but Okay, I'm 38 according to my lab tests, but apparently the calendar thinks I turn like 50 this year. But there's caffeine on this arm, so I like that gun better. But bottom line is, I work out less than most people on the show. I do run Upgrade Labs, so I have access to AI that makes me put on muscle faster and whatever. But seriously, if I can go from that to this, I promise you that anyone as a teenager who's a boy or a girl, you need to deal with your hormones because Mother Nature is not doing it for you, and your government is fighting you to make you weak right now. You can fix it, but you're going to have to learn how to eat some egg yolks, and you're going to have to learn how to eat beef, and you're going to have to learn how to make fun of people on plant-based diets because they're going to make fun of you. They are wrong. If you want to be powerful, you want to have the relationships you want in your life, you want to have the career and to make a difference in the world, you better be at full power. And that does not come from impossible stuff. It comes from actual food. Go get a cow.
Not from the Beyonds of the world. I'm going to just do a recap on what we talked about so far. Oxalic acid and phytic acid. These are pulling minerals from your body. They can create kidney stones and issues with leaky gut, and they're considered anti-nutrients. So
and they're only in plants. Yeah.
Yes. And so we talked about that being potentially a problem for a lot of people on a plant-based diet. And then you did mention...
Well, you said potentially a problem.
Okay, a problem.
Phytic acid is a well-documented problem in humans. It just is. Sorry, your rice cakes suck.
Okay, well, there you go. You heard it. You heard it here. Second, third, fourth. And then let's talk about, because you mentioned earlier, mitochondria, with your trick question about where sex hormones come from, being that the precursors, DHEA and pregnenolone, it's critical that our mitochondria are functioning properly. And that is something that is talked about all the time in anti-aging, longevity, biohacking. And you mentioned a few other things, glyphosate, endocrine disrupting chemicals like BPA, and an issue you had earlier in your life with toxic mold. All of these things are horrible for our mitochondria, including seed oils like canola oil.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to be a fear monger on the podcast, but I do want people to have the information about what is wrecking our mitochondria and what can we do to help mitophagy and create the energy we need.
You don't have to be afraid of anything I said.
Yeah, I'm not.
You have to be aware, right? And the people who fall into fear about this, that is also programming, and it's your mitochondria making you be afraid, believe it or not, because they're running an old program there. If you are going to cross a river, you could be afraid that you'll drown, or you could say, I'm going to swim across the river. I better learn how to swim. That's all I'm saying, right? So if you're feeling fear right now, then you got to go deal with fear, which is part of the world of biohacking anyway. And it's so easy to fall into worry and perfectionism. And this has happened, in nutrition for a long time. There's such a thing as orthorexia, like fear of not eating the right food. You don't need that. But if every time you eat dairy, you break out, you get horrible brain fog, and you want to stab people, maybe you shouldn't eat dairy, because it's not a fear. It's actually something that doesn't work for you, even though the guy next to you can eat ice cream without being a murderer. Okay. Right. You have to know your kryptonite, and it's not the same for everyone. And I am fortunate enough to have more kryptonite than the average person because I was so unhealthy as a kid. I grew up with toxic mold and all sorts of stuff. So I'm good at sorting out. These ones might be guilty. These ones are always guilty, like corn oil. And this stuff works for almost everyone. Yeah, I'm talking about grass-fed beef, grass-fed lamb. Those work for almost everyone, but there are a few people who've been bitten by ticks who can't eat that either. So I'm just sorting stuff out to say, if you want to feel really good, try this for a week, and then go eat a pizza and see how you feel and go, oh, maybe something in that pizza wasn't good for me. It's not that hard.
Definitely. So let's take it back to mitochondria. Why are these guys important? What can we be doing to support them? How can we biohack our little powerhouses?
Mitochondria, we learn about them in 7th grade. They're this part of a cell, and they're the power plant of the cell. And then you circle them on a little diagram, and then you're like, yay, I got my A, and then you forget about them. That is not accurate. Mitochondria are ancient bacteria that moved into a single cell floating in the ocean, and they took over, and they never stop being in charge. Right now in your body, you have way more mitochondria than you do cells in your body, and they're old bacteria. They run a bacteria operating system. They act like bacteria, and they think that you are a walking petri dish, and they love being in charge of you. But since they're stupid, unfortunately, they're very fast. Our consciousness is exceptionally slow. We realize things are happening about a quarter to a half a second after they actually happen. The mitochondria recognize right away. So they're environmental sensors that then do something based on what they sense. And what they can do is they can make electricity, yeah. They can make inflammation, oops. They can also make sex hormones, and they can also make proteins. So these are manufacturing plants or power plants that have their own independent decision-making apart from you. And this is the basis of biohacking. In biohacking, the definition when I first wrote it is the art and science of changing the environment around you and inside of you so you have full control of your own biology. Well, what if you set your environment up so your mitochondria did what you wanted, so then they would make you do what you wanted them to make you do? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Basically, you trick them because they're in charge of us. They get to do stuff before we get to even know that they're doing it. And then we take credit for it all day long. And then we feel guilty about it. That's why mitochondria are so important in this whole conversation. Their primary job throughout the day, about 30 pounds of air and some amount of food, they combine those and they do make electricity and all the other stuff that you do. But if they do a bad job of making electricity, it's like a dirty coal plant versus a super clean, say, a nuclear plant where all the waste is contained and taken away versus just spewed into the atmosphere for everyone to breathe and eat later. Maybe you could have clean power in your body instead of dirty power. And if you want dirty power, you eat a lot of plants, a lot of starch, and a lot of enzyme inhibitors like phytic acid that the mitochondria are made out of, like, saturated fat and the proteins that are so important. So humans on a high carbohydrate, low protein, high plant fat diet have weak mitochondria by definition, and there is no way to get around that. That is just like if you punch yourself in the face, it hurts. Like it's repeatable.
So outside of grass-fed beef and lamb, egg yolks, an animal-rich diet, saturated fats, cholesterol, I'm on board for all of this. By the way, we've got ancestral blend, like liver in my ground beef for my boys. I'm on board with all of that. Outside of the food that we're eating, what can we do to support our longevity, support our mitochondrial health, and biohack our body?
Well, it turns out there are some carnivore people who are like, only eat meat and you'll be happy. Okay. Mm-hmm. When I was developing the Bulletproof Diet, which has helped people lose like 2 million pounds, this is a really big diet book that stood the test of time. I went on a 3-month meat only diet. Actually, I did meat and I did butter. And I would do 1 serving of broccoli a day. I'm like, maybe some fiber. But oh my God, I felt so good for the first month. And after that, I got sicker and sicker and sicker, and my sleep quality went away. And I find this happens a lot. You can do a carnivore only cleanse, including watch out for some of the spices like black pepper and red pepper and cayenne and things like that. Those can be really irritating of the gut. You may need to ditch that. So meat and salt, do it for a week. See how you like it. But if you do that for long periods of time, it creates deficiencies, and it does not work well for the vast majority of people. A few people get away with it. Just like the vegan diet. I've been a raw vegan, I've been a vegan, and I've tried the carnivore thing. And what most people are going to evolve to is where carnivore is evolving, where it's like, well, you could eat the low inflammation plants. Oh, and you could have some honey. And I'm like, yeah, there's a name for that, right? Like that diet exists. And it's centered around animal proteins and animal fats and dairy fat. And if you're going to do dairy, because you can do it, it's raw A2 dairy. And then you have fruit that's in season and not insane amounts of it, and a moderate amount of honey, especially before bed, because it can enhance sleep. Not right before bed necessarily, but after dinner. And that's kind of the Bulletproof Diet in a nutshell. The idea is some plants are really inflammatory, but your mitochondria do not do well with no plants. In fact, the original trading routes on the planet were salt trading routes. And this was not refined salt. This was sea salt full of all the trace minerals, the same kind of trace minerals that are in Danger Coffee without all the sodium. So what was happening there is people were so deficient in minerals, that was the first thing they traded. The second thing that went over those trading routes was spices, herbs and spices, because those were the supplements of the day. Those were the things that introduced polyphenols and certain minerals found in leaves and bark and skins and the other things that make up herbs and spices. So if someone says, oh, you can't ever eat a leaf of a plant or a root, no, every leaf, every root, every stem has to be evaluated on its own merits with pros and cons. Every plant and every meat, everything has a negative side. You can focus on it, or you can look at the equation of good versus bad. And what you'll find is that your mitochondria need oregano, they need rosemary, they need thyme, and they need these polyphenols, these rich colored compounds. That's why tea and coffee fuel most of the world, and chocolate too is so valuable. These are the richest sources of polyphenols. In the US diet, it's coffee. So if you wanted to just, kick your mitochondria in the teeth and say, wake up, guys, you might try some Danger Coffee, because you're going to get all the minerals your mitochondria need, and you're getting a massive dose of polyphenols, and you're not getting all the toxins that typically come from fermentation of coffee, particularly mold toxins, which is a whole different issue. If your mitochondria are ancient bacteria, where did we discover penicillin? Was it in a mold? A toxic mold? Could it be that antibiotics kill bacteria and we are bacterial beings? And that antibiotics are great for getting rid of some bacteria, but they might cause harm to our bacteria that we use every day, or that use us every day, depending on your mindset? I think that's how it works. This is why minimizing mold toxins in your home is a big deal. Moldymovie.com is my free documentary about that, because mold trashed me. I'm just returning the favor. I'm trashing mold back. And mold in coffee is such a thing that most world governments have a standard for mold that says, if you have more than this level of a mycotoxin, a mold toxin, like an antibiotic kind of thing, that's present in your roasted coffee, then you're not allowed to sell it here. So when Japan and China and Europe reject coffee, they send it to the US because the US has no standard. And I don't think that's okay. I quit coffee for 5 years because it made me feel like crap, until I figured out it was the mold, not the coffee. So if coffee makes you anxious and jittery, try some Danger Coffee and see what happens when you get enough minerals. What happens, people drink it and like, why do I like this so much? Yeah, that's the minerals. And then what I feel so good, that's the electrolytes and the coffee minus the toxins. So it's a very different experience. So this is why mold and mitochondria and plants all come together. The polyphenols, the colored compounds from plants, power your gut bacteria. They cause them to change to talk to your mitochondria. They directly affect the mitochondrial membrane. And if the minerals are present and polyphenols from plants are present, you're good. That's why you don't eat only meat. And that's why you don't eat only plants. You got to have both. But most of the plants we eat are not really that good for us. They're just better than starving to death. So pretty much meat and some moderate carbs, and throw away the kale and the spinach and all the really hard to chew gross stuff. It's just not necessary. You don't have to suffer to eat.
Okay, let's take it back to your coffee and the mold comment, because I don't think a lot of people realize that there are certain types of foods that are more prevalent for mold. And you talked about coffee being a serious issue. It's interesting because my younger sister, who's pregnant, her daughter was coughing, and I was like, I think you need to check for mold. And it was crazy levels in her townhouse. Luckily they were renting.
Oh my God. You saved her daughter from a likely autism and autoimmune conditions for life by doing that. Amazing.
Well, I was the crazy health sister who had to text my brother-in-law and be like, Kelly. I need you to know how serious this is. I need you to, and our mom, my parents live like an hour from them. And so I was like, move to mom and dad's this weekend, get out of there right now. Like, you need to figure it out. And then they did urine analysis, but it was, a week to 10 days after they had been there. But what was still showing up in their urine was mold that's most prevalent in food. So can you talk about the types of food that might be coming from?
Oh yeah. Ochratoxin A is the primary culprit here, although there's about 200 types of toxins made by mold. So there are thousands of kinds of mold. Not all mold is dangerous. All mold can cause allergies. I'm talking about mold that makes direct poisons of the human. Mold toxins are directly correlated with cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and cancer. And I have an entire textbook on each one of those subjects, listing study after study after study. So this is actually known, and it's in fact almost impossible to dispute it with a straight face if you are well read. But you can dispute it, and I'm interested if you have a way of telling me that's not what's going on. I really want to know. So the primary toxin in food that we worry about the most is aflatoxin, because we've all heard of it. Aflatoxin is the most cancer-causing of all substances known to man, particularly for liver cancer. And it's found in peanuts and in a lot of grains. It's one of the many reasons not to eat peanut butter and to switch to something else. But aflatoxin is so known about that it's pretty well controlled in food, unless it's some old leftovers. If that jar of peanut butter that's been there for 10 years might not be a good idea to eat, or that, blackened peanut or something. The next one is ochratoxin A. And people don't really know about this one, but this is the one that's most prevalent in coffee. It's also common, very common in beer, and levels allowed in beer and wine are substantially higher than what's allowed in coffee, because people drink less beer and wine than they do coffee. But if you have a problem with beer, this is probably it. Ochratoxin A is associated with systemic inflammation, brain fog, cravings, bladder cancer, and kidney cancer. And the thing about us humans is we suck at toxin elimination. The only other animal that's wired like us is pigs. A rat uses its liver, which is good at detoxing, to detox almost everything. Humans use our kidneys to detox things, including ochratoxin A, which is a poison of the kidneys. So the reason I learned all this stuff early on is something was messing with my mitochondria. My energy levels were low. We couldn't figure it out. My very early functional medicine doctor actually had me take an HIV test. He said, Dave, I don't think you have HIV, but you are not getting better the way people should be. I was living in a house with toxic mold, and we didn't know what we know now about it, but he found that I was allergic to 8 of the top 10 species of toxic mold, and I had just moved out of a really moldy place. I just didn't know it was a problem. So I said, aha, and I started reading agriculture research. Farmers know that if they feed moldy grain, corn and wheat are major sources of mold, that if they feed that to pigs or cows, but in particular pigs, the pigs get fat on less calories. Or if they feed it to pregnant pigs, they all miscarry. So they intentionally buy cleaner food to feed to pregnant pigs so that they won't lose their babies, but then they feed them the moldiest food right before they're going to kill them, because that's cheaper. And then we eat that pork that ate the most toxic food that the pigs couldn't eliminate, and then we don't feel good when we eat industrial pork. That's why I only eat pastured pork that isn't fed that kind of stuff. But corn, soy, wheat, and other grains are the biggest source of this in our food. You will never be on a zero mycotoxin diet. But what you can do, because zero, it could be 1 in 10 gazillion, there's one little tiny molecule in there, and that's not gonna be a problem. So what I would suggest is just minimize the high mold foods and see what a difference it makes in your longevity, in your inflammation, in your muffin top, in the dark circles around your eyes, and all those things. And that means a low grain or no grain diet. White rice is the safest by far. It means not eating corn. Since we started spraying glyphosate on our crops, which is a clear and present danger to the future of humanity at this point, one of the many bad things it does is it causes a fungus called fusarium that's in the soil. Instead of growing on corn so you can see it afterwards, it incorporates its toxins in the roots of corn, so that inside that perfect looking cob of corn, the fusarium is built in. And even worse, when you test for it, it won't show as being present. It was protecting itself from this new form of soil toxin created by man. The combination of man and mold, actually. And then you eat the corn, you digest the sugar, and what's left is the toxin that now would show on a test. So if someone says, I have high levels of this stuff, well, look at your beer, look at your wine, look at your coffee, even chocolate can have it, look at your chocolate, and certainly look at your grain consumption. And if you stop those things, magically, you'll not have those toxins in your body unless you have an onboard infection, which can happen as well. So what's going on here is, don't be paranoid, but the foods that are most toxic, that have the worst oils, have the most spraying and contamination, those are poverty foods that you eat to avoid dying during a famine, but they are not the foods that you eat if you want to develop into the most powerful, long-lived, healthiest, focused person you can be. And you can say, but that's the food my ancestors ate. No. If you are from Mexico, I grew up in New Mexico, the tamales that your grandmother ate were not the same corn. with the same toxins and the same spray that you're eating today. Corn is generally not a good choice anymore. I'm sorry, it doesn't have gluten. It has other bad things in it. So you can eat it if you're starving. You can eat it if you love it. You're willing to pay the cost. But if you're eating popcorn without butter because you think it's good for you, you are just misinformed.
Yeah. Well, it's unfortunate too, because the industrial grains, the industrial seed oils, and, processing, and like just throw sugar in there. That's the majority of the calories that are consumed across the states. And they're the most dangerous, and not the good kind of danger, like your coffee.
Exactly, right.
So why, since you've done the work, let's give the audience some tools. If they do want coffee, this is where you can give a shout out to your coffee brand.
Right.
If they do want coffee, alcohol, or beer, wine, alcohol, if they do want to kind of have a nut butter or something, if you ever do that, what are the brands that you like?
Sure.
What are the ones that you trust?
Dangercoffee.com is the cleanest coffee that I know of, because not only is the coffee excellent and lab tested with my very latest standards, it also has these trace minerals in it that stick to toxic molds, and they stick to toxins in the gut. So it's super, super clean. And if people are saying, oh, I don't believe that mold in coffee is an issue, I have 34 studies on my blog that I've published that show that it survives roasting, it survives brewing, that it's a real problem. And it's such a real problem that I'm not alone, but most governments around the world have put limits in place for this. So I don't think I'm making this up, even though years ago, someone with a competing untested coffee did try to ruin my reputation and say I was lying. There's way too much evidence supporting what I'm saying about ochratoxin A in coffee. So that's dangercoffee.com. Now, if you wanted to have these other compounds, if you drink, say, French wine, they allow 2 parts per million of this toxin. American wine allows 10 parts per million. So you'll feel better on a French wine or a European wine than you will an American one. Most likely, there are exceptions. There are some very clean and amazing wines from the US. You just have to be careful and ask about their quality settings. You'll also find that if you want to drink wine or beer, taking activated charcoal at the same time, which is a biohack I've been talking about for a dozen years now, it will bind some of those toxins, but not all of them in your gut. So instead of your liver and kidneys doing the work, it just gets bound and then you poop it out. So if I'm going to drink wine, you will never see me doing it without taking activated charcoal.
Great. And then I think for the grains, it's just kind of like moving on.
Well, just like, don't eat them. Have some white rice if you're going to do it. Have some cassava. Have some coconut flour. You can get rice flour, something called sweet white rice flour that's glutinous rice. It doesn't have gluten, but it's sticky. So you can make pie crusts. You can make just about everything but a croissant. So sorry, people say, but I like it. If you talk to a heroin addict, and like, but I like my heroin, well, and then keep using your heroin, like, see what happens, right? So the fact you like it, I don't care. My job is to tell you what is going to give you the most energy, the most focus, make you look and feel the way you want to look. And if you say, I don't care, I want to eat it anyway, I respect your right to do that. And I'm not going to cancel you for doing something that I wouldn't do. In fact, I will tell you, well, if you're going to do that, take some enzymes and some charcoal and like good luck with it, because you can still be more resilient even if you're eating foods that aren't really good for you.
I'm going to try to hold back some of my laughter here.
I know, I was watching you. I was like, is she going to make this?
Not really. Okay. But it's refreshing that you own it. It's just so refreshing. Okay. So let's talk about the things that people can do. You said, live your most vibrant life. Like, I want to talk about the sleep, that you don't work out, but you are maintaining this muscle mass. Is this, some crazy injections of NAD plus? Is this something
it's not
else?
That I don't work out. I do like maybe 5, sometimes 10 minutes a week of exercise at this point. Your leanness doesn't come from doing cardio while you're hungry. That is actually a form of torture, a true form of torture that reduces fertility, reduces testosterone, reduces growth hormone, and increases C-reactive protein, which is an inflammation marker. Don't do that. I don't know who made that up, but it's seriously mean-spirited, especially for women who are in their fertile years, because it messes with women's hormones before it takes testosterone out for men. So I don't want to see people doing that. But what you want to do to get lean like that, it's all about what you eat. and it's about getting enough high quality animal protein, and it's about not eating bad fats and not eating those grains, and then having a moderate amount of carbs. A zero carb diet over time isn't going to work very well. So you cycle in and out of ketosis, do some intermittent fasting. That's all it takes. And then the muscle mass comes from this ridiculous thing called testosterone in both men and women. My testosterone levels are where they ought to be for a healthy 30-year-old. Now, my lab tests say I'm 38 and a half, but my sense of humor is 7th grade. So I'm just going to say I'm pinning my hormones to about where they should have been when I was 30. You saw my picture. When I was 30, my hormones weren't as healthy as they are now. I inject testosterone. I have done it since I was 26 under a doctor's supervision, and I make no bones about it. Everyone listening to this, if you're a man, have your levels between 700 and maybe even as high as 1200 if that's what you need to feel good, because there's a high variance for your receptors of testosterone. If you do that, you'll be like, oh my God, it's amazing. If I eat right, I maintain decent muscle mass. And if in a little bit of time, I do exactly the right exercises, I can do what Dave does. Okay, I am the CEO of Upgrade Labs. We are franchising across the US and Canada right now, and we're opening facilities that use artificial intelligence-driven algorithms to cause you to recover faster than you're supposed to, and to put on muscle 3 to 5 times faster than lifting stuff, and to do cardio 12 times faster than you could do it on a spin bike. So this is a big part of what I do. If I'm going to move a muscle to cause it to grow, it's going to get the signal. So I do that kind of a thing, and I go for walks. Yeah, that's pretty important, a 20-minute walk. But seriously, look at your plate. It's what's on your plate. It's not about living in the gym. And if we just get that message out that you got to sleep well, maintain your hormone levels. There are very few people at this point over 30, even like we said, 20-year-old guys are testosterone deficient. But if you go to the doctor, they're like, you're not deficient, you're average for your age. You're like, I want to be average for my grandfather when he was my age. And like, oh yeah. So I think that we're going to just need to support our hormone levels. You want to show up as a woman or a man, you need testosterone. It's the hormone of desire. Yes, bedroom desire, but it's the desire to do stuff that matters. Why do I have a handful of companies? Why do I advise a couple dozen companies? Why do I run the big conference every year? Because I care. If my testosterone was low, I probably wouldn't care as much. It's a part of what makes you have a desire to be a good human being. So desire matters. So that's what it is. It's what you eat and a little bit of movement, high intensity interval training.
And you mentioned sleep well. Can you break down what you think sleeping well looks like and what the science tells us? I know a lot of people
Sure.
have Aura rings, and I mean, there are many people that don't. If you don't, I definitely think that you should check it out and get some information on your bod. But people are sleeping, but they might not be getting restful sleep. Like, how do we hack that?
Thanks for reminding me. I lost my other Aura ring and I have my backup, so I should charge that one up. Having a sleep monitor is going to be incredibly important for you. There's Whoop, your Apple Watch probably does it. There's all sorts of different ways of monitoring your sleep. There's even a company called Sleep Space where just your phone can monitor your sleep without anything else required. Yeah. And what you're going to find is that you can sleep for 8 hours a night, because that's what good people get, right? Mm-hmm. Most people don't get that. Mm-hmm. But if you looked at the studies, they didn't ask, did you exercise really hard the day before? Mm-hmm. Are you tired? Are you awake? Are you sick? Because you might need a different amount of sleep on different nights. But what the really big studies do show is the people who live the longest sleep 6.5 hours per night, not 8 hours a night. People who sleep 8 hours a night die more from all causes than people who sleep 6.5 hours. And people who sleep 7 hours do better sleep 8 hours. And if you need 9 hours to feel refreshed, you have a much higher chance of dying than someone who needs 6 hours or only gets 6 hours. Is that because less sleep makes you live longer? No, it's because healthy people need less sleep. So what I'm telling you is focus on the quality of your sleep, not the length of your sleep. For me, I went from 5 minutes of deep sleep every night and maybe 5 minutes of REM if I got any. Seriously, this was me 15 years ago. I've been tracking my sleep for 15 years. I used to sleep with a headband on before we could get this from the ring. It's not exactly Victoria's Secret approved, if you know what I'm saying.
But I mean, You are, like I said, the founder of biohacking, the godfather, whatever you want to call it. I can only imagine you would just be like the meme with all the tech attached to your body.
Yeah.
Like, I'm gonna get the best night of my sleep of my life, just
Oh,
like
totally. I have done
plugged
that.
in.
I have slept like everything around me is to optimize my sleep. So I'm kind of maybe a sleep cyborg at that point. Fortunately, I now just sleep with the ring on. Well, actually, there's a few other things in the room that help us sleep, but I have less things attached to me these days.
That's good.
Yeah, it's definitely good. Otherwise, how the heck would you ever go on a date? You're like, hold
Yeah.
on. I have to tape my mouth, put in a bite guard. I have to have this thing over my eyes. I have to wear my glasses before bed. And I have some pulse magnetic things over here. And your partner and be like, I can't even see your body underneath all that stuff. And so no, it doesn't have to be like that. But as an experimentalist, I will do that to see what works.
Right.
So I'm going to offer this sleepwithdave.com. This is where I teach everything I know about sleeping more in less time. But right now, I get an hour and a half of deep sleep and an hour and a half of REM sleep in 6.5 hours on most nights. And I do that reliably, even if I'm traveling. I was in Dubai last week, and magically, you can do that. And it means that you watch what you do before you go to sleep. And the big hints for your listeners: after the sun goes down, you should stop eating, because food before bed raises your sympathetic or fight or flight response. And you don't want that to be raised. You want to be in rest and reset mode. Bright lights, even for 5 seconds to find something in the bathroom, is enough to seriously disrupt your sleep. Blue light blocking glasses before bed do not work. They will raise your melatonin, not as much as a melatonin supplement, but there's 3 other kinds of light that also affect your sleep that don't affect your melatonin, and blue light blockers don't get those. Go to truedark.com. I've written the patents for that company, and it's one of my portfolio, but truedark.com, the glasses look more like this. And this is a patent pending tent. It's not just a red tent. But these glasses actually put your brain in the same state as advanced meditation, about to release that study done with EEG monitoring and these glasses. But that's TrueDark. And those doubled my deep sleep. That big of a deal. You can cool your room or cool your mattress. That'll also help. But there's dozens of things. You don't have to do them all. Just do a couple of them and go, oh my God, I wake up and I feel like myself, instead of waking up and having 5 cups of danger coffee and then feeling like myself. If you have to have that much coffee, you're probably doing it wrong.
Mm-hmm. All right. That's sleepwithdave.com. We'll head there.
Isn't that the best URL ever? That one just makes me happy.
It's pretty funny. All right. So I think we have to wrap it up with something with some of the things that you're most excited about on the cutting edge of biohacking, maybe things that are unattainable, or even stuff that we might not have access to that you think is really exciting and coming in maybe even a decade.
Okay. One of the things that has me most excited is stem cells. And I've put these in several of my books. I've had my bone marrow taken out, my fat lipo sucked. They take about a coffee cup's worth in order to get your stem cells out of the fat. So I haven't had like body sculpting liposuction anymore, like extraction of cell liposuction. And what's going on now is David Sinclair and others are figuring out how to reverse aging in cells. So we're right on the edge of being able to take your stem cells out of your body, maybe not even from your bone marrow, just from your blood. And there are normally none in your blood, but there's a way to get them into your blood. There's a way to reverse their age. So you will have banked, so you can use it whenever you need to, your stem cells from when you were 30 years old. So when you're 130, you will be able to replenish your stem cells. And if you've read my book on anti-aging called Superhuman, there's 7 big pillars of aging, and one of them is stem cell exhaustion. You run out of stem cells and your stem cells get old and crusty, just like you do, especially if you don't have enough testosterone. Mm-hmm. So you kept your testosterone levels where they were, and as your stem cells got depleted, you added new ones back in. And defeated the FDA in court over your right to use cells from your body for your purposes. The FDA, in conjunction with big pharmaceutical companies, was trying to classify your cells as a drug that they could regulate. Berman won, and he passed away a month after winning, and his son is continuing the legacy and spoke at the conference. Scott Berman spoke. So what that means is you now have the right to extract your stem cells however you want, to put them in a bank and to grow them as much as you need them in culture medium and put them back in. So what this means is now, yes, it's expensive. And I've written multiple books and interviewed people all over the place about it, like Docere clinics in Park City, where I've had a lot of my work done with stem cells. What you're going to find is that it's still expensive, but it's much less than it was 10 years ago. And I think going forward, most people over time are going to say, you know what, if I can get my stem cells, even if I'm 50 or 60, and I bank them and I just turn their age back to 30, I can have them forever. And this is going to allow us to treat all kinds of diseases. But more importantly, I want my body to heal like a young body, so that, you know, I can move and act and think like a person who's in their prime. And I will tell you right now, I am in my prime, way more so than I ever have been before. Then again, I'm only 38, according to the labs. I'm going to believe them.
Well, that's great. I'm going to throw that in the show notes because I think I personally would love to bank some stem cells before I turn 40. Why not?
It's a great idea. And at the Biohacking conference, I think we had a couple of companies that could do it, but I would just say work with whoever your stem cell doctor is for stuff like that. The other thing that's really exciting to me, maybe even more than stem cells, is neurofeedback. So one of my portfolio companies is called 40 Years of Zen. And we've got 1,500 scans of high performing entrepreneurs, people who've done really big things in the world. And we take people in for 5 days, and now we're starting to use AI algorithms, and we're training your brain to do stuff that would take you years and years of daily meditation to learn how to do. And the results are profound. So you come in, and instead of just taking up a practice and grinding away at it and eventually getting there, you walk out of there after 5 days going, what just happened? I can't believe that I can do this. So it's a profound thing, but we can also performance tune your brain in ways that have never been done before. I think we've got 7 patents now on this technology. We had to build our own hardware and our own software for interpreting brainwaves, because I don't want to fix broken brains. I want to take brains that are working pretty well and make them super brains. It's a different way of thinking, but it's happening. And it's happening in a major way. And for the first time, 40 Years of Zen now is able to do it remotely. We can do about half the program where you're at home, and we have someone on camera with you who's working with you to teach you the technique and to guide you using electrical signals from your own brain to tell you whether you're doing it right or wrong. I don't want anyone to have to exercise ever again. I want you 1 second once a week to get all of the stimulation your body needs to move and feel and grow and look exactly the way you want. And I don't want you to have to ever meditate again. I want to give you 1 second a week where all of the meditation that you needed to be fully enlightened was right there. We're not anywhere close to that, but that's the goal. The idea that you're supposed to suffer. I'm going to meditate for 3 hours a day. Screw my kids. They don't need me. Yeah. Okay, maybe that didn't work, right? I'm just going to go to the gym like I did, an hour and a half a day, 6 days a week, right? Even during final exams, it didn't matter if I was sick. I'm going to go because I'm going to lose this weight. And then I didn't. I just want to undo that. I want to free people from the drudgery of exercise so that we can go play. And we can go play soccer if we want to, but we don't have to. And we won't get injured when we do it. And I want to free people from the drudgery of paying attention to how we pay attention. Because actually, meditation is drudgery. I'll still do it. I've meditated with the masters. I've learned all over the planet. I've traveled to Nepal and Tibet and South America, and I've learned the techniques. I just teach the techniques with a computer telling me whether I'm doing it right or wrong 1,000 times a second so I can learn faster, because I'm lazy. So I would just encourage you, Kelly, I would encourage all of your listeners. Mother Nature wired your mitochondria to be lazy. They're always lazy. So reward yourself. Figure out how to do it better, and then celebrate the fact that you just saved an hour, because that workout was totally effective, and now you can just go chill or go do something that matters. That's what I want.
So I'm really curious, with 40 Years of Zen, did you go through it personally? You obviously have gone through this personally, and what came out of it at the end for you?
Oh, I spent 6 months of my life with electrodes glued to my head every day in order to develop the program. And I've had my own EEG equipment for 25 years. I'm a computer science guy and, part of biohacking. So when I do it, there's a whole bunch of different mystical states and high meditation states and heart opening and forgiveness and gratitude. And each of these states has corollaries. with brain states. So you can look at someone's brain and say, oh, this is a brain that's got a lot of trauma, not physical trauma. You can see that too, but it can just be emotional trauma, right? And that brain is chaotic. And you can say, all right, let's train the brain to be less chaotic. But instead of just interacting with it electrically, what works for 40 years of Zen, and that's unlike any other program like it, is there's a structured thing where I teach you a visualization. And when you do the visualization and the computer's telling you, oh, yep, that you got it. No, you didn't do it. Nope, yep, a little bit more of that, a little bit less of that. You're like, oh my God, I have control. And then you realize that there's a switch you can throw, which we call reset mode, that puts your brain into the ability to turn off notifications. What you have right now, Kelly, is a little voice in your head going like, how does my hair look? Like, is that, is my head tipped the right way, or whatever the heck the voice in your head, maybe he likes me, maybe he's judging me, or maybe you're not thinking about that at all. You're just worried about whether your mother-in-law likes you. I have no idea. But bottom line is we all have this annoying critical voice inside our head. Well, what it is, it's a notification from your mitochondrial alerting system going, there might be something dangerous. There might be something dangerous. Worry. Is there enough food? Eat the Snickers. Oh my goodness. Like, oh, should you go out on a date with that person? Look at those legs. And there's like this dumb little voice in your head that's constantly distracting you. It's just trying to keep you alive and keep the species alive. So it's set up poorly. You can go through and turn off notifications. If you had your phone and you never turned off any notification, you couldn't use your phone because it'd be just popping up. Your brain is like a phone with no notifications turned off. When you meditate, you realize how many of them are there, and maybe you even learn to turn a few of them off. I just have a better way of turning off notifications in your brain so that you only get notifications when a tiger's about to jump out, and you'll automatically move away from it instead of constantly worrying about a tiger jumping out, but it's just your boss asking you to do your job.
So this can happen if someone wanted to go in person within 5 days.
Oh yeah. Not just for one alert, for turning off dozens or hundreds of them. And it's a very big thing. And you see changes in BDNF, changes in wiring of the brain. What 40 Years of Zen does in person, it's in Seattle, is 3 days of reset mode training and then 2 days of performance tuning. So we can increase voltage in the brain, so you actually have more electricity, or we can change the rate of firing for different connective networks in the brain. It's a profoundly effective program that's changed my life. I couldn't do what I do now, not by a long shot, if I was spending half of my mental energy on the angry, mean voice that I used to have in my head.
We shut down those notifications, and now you're just the 7th grade humor guy. So
I would be able to turn that off, not going to.
Yeah. All right. Let's wrap today's podcast with day in the life of you, because I think it's been ever evolving based on the science and the things that you learn. But what is today's day in the life look like?
Woke up, took my thyroid. I've been on thyroid for a long time. I have Hashimoto's. It's the autoimmune markers are mostly gone, but my markers are low. Most people over 40 have the beginnings of thyroid dysfunction. It's one of the reasons your metabolism slows down. Mine doesn't, because I'm on thyroid as part of my anti-aging program. So you take that first, and you need to wait at least 20 minutes before you do anything else, because otherwise it'll get absorbed. So after 20 minutes, I made a shot of espresso, kind of like a strong Americano, for both of my kids and one for myself. Hopped in the car, drove my kids to school, dropped them off. My phone was on airplane mode the entire time. Didn't look at it, because your phone is another source of notifications that you simply don't need until you're ready. Once I dropped the kids off, then I drove home, listened to an audiobook, re-listening to one of David Hawkins' books, which is, he's a guy who's done a lot of spiritual work. In fact, some of his work informs 40 Years of Zen. There's a lot of very well-known texts about forgiveness and about these different Zen states. And I'm just making them teachable. It takes a long time to learn in a monastery. I know, because I've been to the monasteries. It just takes less time to learn when the computer gets quiet when you do it wrong. So you're like, well, I guess I'll do something else, until magically the computer's loud and you got the state. So I did, but I listened to that because I'm constantly learning and tweaking the program. From then, so I got home. I did an hour of somatic work with a somatic therapist. I'm rewiring the way my body moves, my nervous system, just like yours, just like everyone listening, it learns to move ineffectively. So because I grew up duck-footed, because I've had 3 knee surgeries before I was 24, I'll do weird things. Like when I move my femur, I'll also tighten up a muscle in my back that doesn't need to be tight. So I'm wasting energy, but it also just affects how fluidly and comfortably I move. So I'm rewiring my legs to work the way they were supposed to, that I never learned. Most of us have problems with this, to the point that AI researchers, especially in China, but everywhere, they can identify you by how funny you walk. Every one of us, we have fingerprints, we have iris scans, and we have the way we walk that is unique to us. So I am changing my identity, at least according to AI, because I'm learning how to walk more effectively than I did before. Sounds like a small thing, it's a big thing. I did that. Then I had an all hands call with my team for the Asprey group, which is, I said 6, but it's probably closer to 10 companies like Upgrade Labs and Danger Coffee and 40 Years of Zen, as well as my membership and mentorship group. And then I hopped on a podcast with you. Oh, and I took a handful of smart drugs along the way. I forgot about that. I took all my supplements.
So you had the espresso and you gave your kids the espresso. How old are they and
They've been drinking coffee since they were 1 year old.
can we just dive into that for a hot second?
Sure.
Caffeine, why at a young age? It's a smart drug.
Caffeine is not bad for humans at normal doses. It's good for us. There was a company in the 1950s that made a burned grain beverage full of bad stuff like advanced glycation end products and gluten and other things. And they hired a guy in a white lab coat to walk around and say, coffee stunts your children's growth. There is zero evidence for that, but people still believe it, just like we believe cornflakes are health food instead of an anti-testosterone food, which is what they were designed to be. So no evidence that coffee is bad for kids, but there is evidence that a small amount of caffeine doubles ketone production in the morning. And the way this started was when my daughter, my oldest, was 1 year old. She was reaching for my cup of coffee. It was lukewarm, just black coffee. I'm like, well, sure, I'll let her have a sip. She probably won't drink it again until she's 18. And she took one sip and went, and then she just buried her face in it and fought me for the cup. She just likes her coffee. So who am I to argue with that? So she's had, her own little coffee cup, an espresso cup with just normal black coffee in it since she was 1. And she's enjoyed it the whole time. My son too. And so they can have one small cup of coffee. A shot of espresso has about 50 milligrams of caffeine, not a lot. And it improves academic performance. They like it. And it doesn't make kids happy. If it's clean coffee, they're getting their polyphenols just like I do. I have no issues with it, and there's no health arguments against it. If they're drinking 5 cups of, Starbucks super sugar blend rainbow artificial color corn syrup, that's not what we're doing here. They're drinking black coffee and sometimes with butter and MCT.
Love it. So when will you consume chewable food today?
I guess it's 1:00 now. Probably after this, I might eat some grass-fed something, or I might wait till like 5:00 at dinner. I could conceivably put some protein powder in coffee too. Wouldn't surprise me.
Okay, cool. And when do you cut off the caffeine for yourself?
I cut the caffeine off at 2:00 because it affects sleep. For most people, 2:00 is the cutoff. If you're a slow metabolizer, it could be 10 a.m. or noon. And if you're a fast metabolizer, I know people who can drink coffee at 6:00 and still get deep sleep. But I wish I was one of those. I'm not. Yeah. The research shows that you need up to 5 cups a day, and probably the ideal peak is 3. There's multiple studies that say that you get the most anti-aging and longevity benefits. One group of studies says 5 cups a day is optimal, and another more recent study says 3 cups a day is optimal. So what I do is I usually do 3 cups during the day. These are shots of espresso, so they're not as strong as a normal brewed coffee. And then at night, I'll do a cup of decaf. And decaf is usually moldier than not, so make sure it's a good quality decaf.
And Danger Coffee has espresso, regular beans, and decaf?
Danger Coffee has regular beans that make amazing espresso. We don't have decaf yet, but we will.
Okay. Keep us posted.
All right.
So first of all, thank you so much for being on the podcast. It's been a lot of fun and just always funny. So I appreciate it. Where can people follow along? Where can they,
Well,
snag Danger Coffee? When can they expect your next book?
all right. Next book is in March. I think you might be able to pre-order it. I'm always grateful for those. It's called Smarter, Not Harder.
Okay.
And just search for Dave Asprey. I'm pretty sure that it's on Amazon. There might even not be a cover up because we're still in the late, like working with the publisher on the second revision of all the revisions. And so that's in March is when you'll be able to get that. My podcast is called The Human Upgrade, 2 episodes a week. It's been on for almost 10 years, 250,000,000 downloads and counting. So I learn every week. You can find me on daveasprey.com. You can join my mentorship group, 40 Years of Zen, dangercoffee.com. It's a bunch of stuff. Bottom line, don't do everything. Whatever we talked about that was the most interesting here, maybe it was sleepwithdave.com. That's the best URL by far. Pick one and do it and get your toe wet with biohacking and keep listening to you, Kelly, because you've got some good stuff on here.
Oh, thanks, Dave. Well, thanks for being here. I'll put all those links in the show notes and we'll put a link to that pre-order. Wait for the cover.
Nice.
Thanks, Dave.